There is a subtle ache that lives in your chest, one you've tried to ignore for years. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It stirs late at night when everything else has gone quiet. It pulses softly when you're smiling, just to be liked, nodding when you disagree, staying when your heart is already halfway out the door. That ache is not weakness. It's a message, a sacred alert from your deeper self that something is out of alignment. You've felt it before, maybe in a conversation where you laughed on cue but felt hollow, or in the arms of someone who liked the version of you that didn't speak up too much, or maybe in that long stretch of days when everything looked fine on the outside, but your inner world was gray and crumbling. The ache is what happens when you compromise what is sacred to you in order to belong, when you mistake peace for silence and connection for convenience. You weren't born to be agreeable, you were born to be whole. And yet, it's so easy to settle, to take what's given instead of reaching for what's true, to fear the loneliness of waiting more than the slow death of staying. You tell yourself, maybe this is enough, maybe this is all there is. But deep down, something inside you knows better. That voice, quiet but persistent, keeps rising like a tide. There is more. There is more. This is the tension between your surface life and your soul life. Carl Jung called it the conflict between persona and self. The persona wants comfort, approval, acceptance. The self wants truth, freedom, alignment, when the two are at war. You begin to feel that ache, subtle but constant, dull but undeniable, like wearing shoes a size too small and convincing yourself you'll get used to the pinch. But your spirit wasn't designed to shrink. And so, a decision quietly begins forming beneath your habits, a slow turning toward yourself. It doesn't happen with fireworks. It happens with a breath, a pause, a refusal to laugh when something doesn't feel funny, a choice to stop explaining yourself, a choice to rest, to wait, to listen. When you don't settle, you begin to feel again, not the instant rush of validation, but the steady rhythm of your own pulse. You begin to notice what energizes you and what drains you, what expands your chest and what knots your stomach. You start to trust those signals not as drama, but as data. Your nervous system becomes your compass, your body, your sanctuary. Your no becomes holy. Still, the fear creeps in. But what if I lose them? What if they walk away? What if I'm alone forever? And here is the hardest truth you will ever learn. Losing someone who never truly saw you is not a loss, it is a return to yourself, to your clarity, to your quiet power. The part of you that longs for real connection must first stop settling for the imitation. You cannot call in depth while clinging to surface. You cannot claim soul intimacy while choosing familiarity over growth. Every time you betray yourself for someone else's comfort, you abandon the very love you're seeking. So ask yourself gently, without judgment, where am I still negotiating my worth? It's not always obvious. Sometimes it's in the things you laugh off, the red flags you color white, the silence you justify. Sometimes it's in the small. Repeated decisions, the texts you answer when you're tired, the invitations you accept out of guilt, the opinions you mute to keep the peace. But you are not here to be digestible. You are here to be felt. Let that sink in, to be felt, not liked, not approved, not palatable, felt as you are, in your full truth. That means some will leave. Let them. That means some will misunderstand. Let them. That means some doors will close. Let them. Because what remains, what stays, what grows, after that, that is what's real. It is not your job to carry the weight of others' comfort at the cost of your aliveness. It is not your job to stay small so others don't feel insecure. It is not your job to sacrifice your becoming for someone else's convenience. It is your job to listen, to honor the ache, to let it guide you back to your center. This is the beginning of individuation, not separation from others, but reunion with your true self. You may feel raw, exposed, like a tree stripped of leaves, but even in your barest state, you are honest. And honesty is fertile soil. It's where the real connections take root, not in the version of you that performs, but in the version that breathes, that cries, that dares to be seen. So breathe now, deeper. Let the ache speak. Let it rise without rushing to soothe it away. Let it tell you the truth that your soul is tired of settling, and your real life, the one that fits, awaits just beyond the next honest no. There's a kind of tired that sleep cannot touch. It's the tired that builds over years of saying, "This is fine," when everything inside you is whispering, "This is not it." It begins as a small compromise, staying when you want to go, laughing when you want to cry, agreeing when your heart disagrees. But like a river that slowly carves its way through stone, settling wears away your spirit, grain by grain. You don't notice it at first. You tell yourself it's maturity, patience, compromise. You've been told that love means endurance, that connection means sacrifice. But no one told you that when sacrifice becomes a habit, you vanish. The sharpness of your truth blunts. Your colors fade. The fire dims, not because it has no fuel, but because the windows are shut. The oxygen cut off, slowly, gently, by your own hands. You may still smile, still function, still show up, but something sacred begins to dull. Your voice doesn't feel like your own. Your choices are quieter now, more hesitant. You wait to be chosen instead of choosing. You analyze every word before speaking, wondering how it might land, who it might disappoint, what it might cost. You become careful. But the cost of constant caution is aliveness. Carl Jung spoke of the soul's demand for wholeness. When you settle, you fragment. You tuck away the inconvenient parts, your anger, your needs, your dreams, your standards. You silence your wildness and call it maturity. You dim your sensuality and call it modesty. You lower your expectations and call it realism. But each time you pretend, a small part of you recedes deeper into the fog. And eventually, you don't know what you want anymore, only what others expect. This is the slow death of the spirit, not dramatic, not explosive, just a gradual numbing, like frost creeping in through the cracks of a house you forgot to warm. You feel the cold most acutely at night when you're alone, when no one is watching, when the masks come off. That's when the silence asks the hard question, is this really enough for you? Settling is not love. It is fear disguised as peace. You stay because you fear the unknown, the loneliness, the judgment. But fear doesn't nurture you. It shrinks you. It tells you that your standards are too high, that your dreams are too much, that your longings are unrealistic. But what if your longings are holy? What if the ache you feel is the voice of your future self, pulling you forwards? You don't need a million connections. You need one that sees you, feels you, holds space for the vastness that is you, not just the easy parts, but the messy, molten, divine complexity that lives beneath your surface. The right connection doesn't require you to be less. It calls you into more. But you cannot attract more while clinging to less. Here's the paradox when you dare to not settle. There will be a silence, a space, an in-between, and that space is terrifying because it is empty. And in that emptiness, all your doubts echo louder. Am I asking for too much? Maybe this is the best I'll get. Maybe I should go back. This is your shadow speaking, the part of you still afraid to trust the unknown, the part that remembers rejection like a scar and equates solitude with abandonment. But the space is not a punishment. It is preparation. It's the sacred pause between chapters, the place where you shed what no longer fits and slowly, courageously begin to grow new skin. It's the cocoon, not the coffin. But you must learn to stay there, to feel the stillness without rushing to fill it, to trust that the silence is doing something sacred inside you. That's where transformation happens. That's where clarity returns. Ask yourself, what have I been calling love that is actually fear in disguise? Perhaps it's the relationship where you feel more anxious than seen, the friend who drains you but makes you feel guilty for pulling away, the job that pays the bills but starves your soul, the pattern of saying yes when everything in your body screams no. You already know what needs to be released. You've known for a long time. The only thing left is the courage to act. And courage doesn't mean feeling ready. It means feeling the fear and walking forward anyway. You don't have to burn your life down. Sometimes. Transformation begins in whispers. A single boundary, a new way of speaking, a refusal to explain, a moment of listening to your body before your mind talks you out of it, a sacred pause before you say yes again. The more you honor these small shifts, the more your spirit brightens. And then something begins to return. Your laughter sounds different, less forced. Your posture changes, shoulders back, chest open. Your gaze softens. Your energy no longer leaks into what doesn't nourish you. And slowly, the dullness fades. Your colors return. Not because someone gave them to you, but because you stopped giving them away. This is the reward for not settling yourself. The lightness, the clarity, the feeling of coming home not to a person or a place, but to your own presence. And in that presence, the real connections begin to appear, not all at once, not in a movie scene climax, but in quiet synchronicities, in conversations that feel like remembering, in eyes that meet yours without needing translation, in love that feels like exhale, not performance. So exhale now. Let go of what dulls you. Let go of what once made sense, but no longer fits. Let go of what you tried so hard to love, but could never meet you where you truly live. The dullness is not your fate, it is your signal. And the moment you stop settling, the color returns. There's a moment quiet, almost unnoticeable, when you begin to sense that the connection you're holding on to isn't truly about the other person. It's about what they represent, a hope, a dream, a patch for something unhealed. And when that moment arrives, it can feel disorienting because you realize that perhaps you weren't in love with them at all. You were in love with the reflection of yourself you were trying to find in their eyes. This is projection, and it's one of the most deceptive mirrors we gaze into. Carl Jung taught that we unconsciously cast parts of ourselves, especially those we haven't fully accepted, onto others. We fall not for who they are, but for what they seem to carry: strength we deny in ourselves, tenderness we disowned long ago, confidence we've buried, or wounds we haven't healed. And because these projections live in the unconscious, they feel like fate, like magic, like I've known them forever. But what you've recognized is not their soul. It's a part of yours, calling out for reunion. This is why settling can feel so compelling. You aren't just clinging to a person, you're clinging to the piece of yourself they seem to complete. Think back. Have you ever stayed in a relationship not because of how it made you feel, but because of how it made you feel about yourself? Maybe they made you feel needed, or chosen, or beautiful, or worthy. You became addicted to that mirror. And so, even when the relationship turned hollow or hurtful, you held on. Because letting go of them felt like letting go of that reflection. But here is the trap: when you look to someone else to reflect your value, you will always be at the mercy of their gaze. One day they adore you, and you shine. The next, they withdraw, and your light flickers. You become a marionette strung to the mood of someone else's attention. You shapeshift, you overgive, you perform, all to see that fleeting glow in their eyes again, that glow that says, you matter, but the glow doesn't last, because it never came from you. Projection is seductive. It offers a shortcut to self-worth, but it always ends in distortion. The more you project, the more you lose clarity. You stop seeing the other person as they are. You stop seeing yourself as you are. Instead, you live inside a fantasy, sometimes hopeful, sometimes painful, always unstable. And the more you settle for that illusion, the more you delay the real work, owning the parts of yourself you've disowned. Ask yourself, what am I trying to retrieve through this person? Maybe it's the safety you never felt as a child, the approval your parents withheld, the spark of aliveness you lost in a past betrayal, the tenderness you refused to give yourself, the dream of being seen without having to reveal too much. When you answer honestly, a quiet sorrow may surface, because you realize this person, no matter how magnetic, is not capable of giving you what you're truly seeking. That ache, that's the sound of a false mirror cracking. And though it hurts, it is a blessing. Because once the mirror breaks, you can begin to see clearly again. You can see them not as your salvation, but as another human being, beautiful, flawed, limited. And you can see yourself not as a puzzle piece waiting to be completed, but as a whole and complex soul whose worth does not depend on being reflected back. When you stop projecting, you begin reclaiming. You reclaim your strength, you reclaim your voice, you reclaim your light. Not because someone else finally sees it, but because you stop outsourcing your vision. You realize that the tenderness you craved was always yours to give, that the confidence you admired was waiting inside you, that the love you chased was echoing from your own core, asking to be returned home. But this doesn't happen instantly. The absence of projection can feel like a kind of grief. You look around and see fewer sparks, fewer intoxicating highs. The world seems quieter, less romantic. But this quiet is not emptiness. It is the sound of truth returning. And in that quiet, something sacred emerges: discernment. You no longer fall for charisma. You look for integrity. You no longer chase those who validate you. You notice those who respect your boundaries. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. You choose calm presence over dramatic passion. You see more. You settle less. This is how you make space for real connection. Not projection, not fantasy, but soul-level resonance. You'll know it when you feel it. It won't feel like obsession. It won't feel like a high. It won't feel like hunger. It will feel like breathing, like your nervous system unclenching, like your mask slipping off without effort, like being seen and still feeling safe. But you only get there by dismantling the illusions, by asking, again and again, what part of myself am I seeking in them? And then offering that part your own presence. You are not broken. You are not missing pieces. You are not too much. You are simply learning to see yourself clearly without distortion, without disguise, without delay. The next time you feel the pull towards someone who stirs something powerful inside you, pause before you fall into the old story. Ask yourself, do I want them or what I've projected onto them? That question can save you years of heartbreak. And in its quiet answer, you might just find the mirror you've been searching for was never outside you. It was always waiting in your own honest gaze. There comes a moment when you begin to feel the weight of the mask you've worn for so long. At first, it was light, almost effortless. You didn't even notice you were putting it on. A soft smile to avoid conflict, a polite laugh to smooth the silence, a gentle nod to stay agreeable. But over time, that mask becomes heavy, and eventually, you forget what your face looks like without it. You learned early on that acceptance was conditional, that to belong, you had to behave, that to be loved, you had to be easy, easy to understand, easy to please, easy to manage. And so, you shaped yourself around other people's comfort, you adapted, you edited, you swallowed your truths so others wouldn't flinch. But each act of self-erasure left a mark, a quiet, invisible grief. The grief of not being known. Carl Jung often spoke about the tension between persona and shadow, the face we show the world versus the parts we hide. When the persona becomes too rigid, too curated, too disconnected from the real self, we begin to fracture inside. You feel it in subtle ways: a dissonance, a hollowness, a longing for something more real. You might be surrounded by people, yet feel profoundly alone. You might be praised for being so easy to be around, yet feel like no one truly sees you. You might even feel loved, but still feel unknown. Because what they love is not you, it's the version of you that never made them uncomfortable. That's the tragedy of the mask. It gains you proximity, but at the cost of intimacy. It lets you be liked, but not loved. It helps you fit in, but keeps you from belonging. You are everywhere and nowhere, present in body, absent in soul. And over time, that absence becomes unbearable. You begin to notice it in conversations that leave you tired, in relationships that demand performance, in situations where your silence screams louder than your words. You start to feel more like a role than a person, more like a reflection than a presence. The mask that once kept you safe now feels like a cage. But taking it off? That's terrifying, because who are you without it? What if they leave when you stop performing? What if they withdraw when you start telling the truth? What if love disappears the moment you show up as your whole, unfiltered self? These are not just questions. They are old wounds, echoes of times when your truth was met with punishment, when your honesty was labeled selfish, when your needs were dismissed, when your bigness was too much. And so, you learned to shrink, to dim, to wear the mask and call it kindness. but the soul cannot thrive in captivity. The longer you wear the mask, the dimmer your inner fire becomes. You lose your intuition. You forget your desires. You become disconnected from the voice inside that says, "This isn't me." And yet, that voice never fully disappears. It waits. It watches. It whispers. You hear it in the moments between things in the shower, in traffic, at night when the lights are off. It asks, what would it feel like to be real? Not polished, not perfect, not pleasant, real. The answer doesn't come in words. It comes in breath, in the relief of not pretending. In the moment you say no, without guilt. In the moment you share the messy, half-formed truth instead of staying silent. In the moment someone sees the parts you thought were unlovable and doesn't flinch. That's how the mask begins to crack. You don't have to rip it off all at once. You can let it soften. You can let it loosen in safe spaces. You can start with one honest sentence, one pause before people-pleasing, one act of self-trust. And each time you choose truth over performance, the mask loses a bit of its power. You will feel naked at first. Exposed, raw, like a turtle without a shell. You might even grieve the comfort the mask once gave you. That's okay, because even if the mask kept you safe, it also kept you from being known. And you are ready now, not just to be seen, but to be felt. To say this is who I am. To say this is what I need. To say I will no longer trade authenticity for approval. This is the quiet revolution, the turning point, the return to wholeness. Ask yourself now, where am I still performing to be accepted? Maybe it's in a relationship where you walk on eggshells, a friendship where you never speak your truth, a job where your brilliance is stifled, a family dynamic where your silence keeps the peace. Wherever it is, you already feel the ache. You already know the cost. And here's the truth. The love that requires you to wear a mask is not love. It is transaction. It is illusion. It is a house built on sand. Real love soul, love asks for your presence, not your performance. It might be rare, it might take time, but it exists. And it begins the moment you stop hiding, the moment you dare to show your unfiltered face to the world, not because you're certain you'll be embraced, but because you're done abandoning yourself. This is not about being reckless. It's about being real. It's about knowing that your softness is strength, your truth is sacred, your wholeness is worthy, even if not everyone stays. Because the ones who stay when the mask is gone, those are your people. Those are your mirrors. Those are the connections worth holding. So let your face breathe. Let your voice tremble. Let your truth rise. The world doesn't need another mask. It needs more of you. There is a strange kind of irony in the way we cling to what we most want to avoid. You fear rejection, so you seek out people who are emotionally unavailable. You fear abandonment, so you stay in relationships where you are constantly proving your worth. You fear being unseen, so you overextend, overexplain, overcompensate until you vanish. It doesn't make logical sense, but fear does not operate in logic. It speaks the language of survival, and survival, to the frightened part of your psyche, often means repetition. If something feels familiar, even if it's painful, it feels safe, predictable, known. Carl Jung called this the compulsion to repeat the wound. Until we make the unconscious conscious, we will call it fate and live it over and over again. So you settle not because you don't know your worth, but because you fear confirming the opposite. You fear that if you ask for more, you'll be left, that if you raise your standards, no one will meet them, that if you stand in your truth, you'll be met with silence. So you choose relationships that confirm the very pain you're afraid of. You say, I just want to be loved, but you attach to those who withhold it. You say, I want someone who sees me, but you pursue those who don't know how to look. You say, I want safety, but you find chaos, again and again, and mistake the adrenaline for love. But what if that pattern isn't a flaw? What if it's a map, a breadcrumb trail that, when followed with awareness, leads you straight to the place where your healing is needed most? Your fear is not the enemy, it is the gatekeeper. It shows you where you've been hurt, where you've been abandoned, where you've been silenced. It shows you what still lives in shadow. And the only way to stop attracting what you fear is to stop running from it, to turn toward it, to listen. What does your fear say when you get quiet? Maybe it says, you're too much. Maybe it says, you'll always be alone. Maybe it says, you're not lovable unless you perform. Maybe it says, if you ask for what you need, you'll be punished. These aren't just thoughts, they are echoes, old voices etched into the nervous system, beliefs that took root in moments of pain and were mistaken for truth. But they're not truth, they're trauma. And once you begin to see that clearly, everything starts to shift. You no longer choose partners who replicate your childhood dynamics. You no longer stay where you are invisible. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You recognize the familiar ache, and instead of collapsing into it, you pause, you breathe, you ask, is this love or is this a lesson? And that pause, that's power. It's the moment you choose differently, the moment you break the cycle, the moment you honor the frightened part of you, not by feeding it, but by re-parenting it, holding it, listening to it, offering it safety from within instead of searching for safety in others. Fear loses its grip when it is met with presence. So what if the very thing you fear being alone, being rejected, being unseen is the doorway? What if solitude is where your true self returns? What if rejection is protection from what doesn't align? What if being unseen by others gives you space to finally see yourself? These are not platitudes. They are sacred reversals, alchemical turns, the moment when shadow becomes teacher and pain becomes portal. Because when you face what you fear, you stop vibrating with desperation. You stop attracting what echoes your insecurity. You begin to radiate groundedness, clarity, wholeness. And wholeness has a frequency that repels chaos. You no longer settle because you know what it costs. You no longer fear solitude because you've made peace with your own company. You no longer chase love because you've become love. From this place, connection becomes something you welcome, not something you cling to. You no longer need someone to fill you. You are full, and in that fullness, the right souls find you not because you need them, but because you are ready to meet them. Ask yourself now, where am I still living from fear? Maybe it's in the way you apologize before speaking your truth. Maybe it's in the way you stay silent instead of setting boundaries. Maybe it's in the way you chase attention just to feel seen, whatever it is. Look at it without shame. Fear is not weakness. It is an invitation to become conscious, and you are becoming. Little by little, you are learning that you do not have to repeat the past, that you can choose presence over pattern, that you can stop settling not because you're arrogant, but because you are healing, and healing changes what you attract. So when the fear rises again, and it will, don't run, stay, listen, offer it your breath, offer it your compassion, let it speak, and then remind it gently, I am safe now. I no longer need to settle to survive. That is when the world begins to change around you. Because the moment you stop vibrating from fear, you begin attracting from truth. There's a moment soft, almost imperceptible when something inside you refuses. Not loudly, not with anger, not with fire, but with a quiet, anchored no. You might not even hear it at first. It speaks below the surface, in the subtle resistance to returning that call, in the sudden exhaustion when asked to bend again, in the pause before you say yes, like you always have, but this time, you don't. This is the soul's rebellion, not against others, but against the part of you that has learned to abandon yourself in order to be loved. It doesn't look like chaos. It looks like stillness, like choosing not to respond immediately, like going inward before you reach outward, like walking away from what no longer resonates without needing to make a scene. It's not reactive, it's conscious. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. This rebellion is part of that path. It is not about being difficult. It is not about being distant. It is about no longer being willing to betray your own knowing for the sake of fitting in. You feel it first in the body, a heaviness in your chest when you're about to people please, a tension in your jaw when you suppress your truth, a dull ache in your back when you carry more than your share. Your soul, is speaking through sensation. It's saying, enough. And when you begin to listen, you realize something astonishing. You don't have to fight to reclaim yourself. You only have to stop giving yourself away. You see, you've been trained to believe that self-abandonment is noble, that keeping the peace is strength, that staying silent is maturity, that enduring discomfort is proof of love. But your soul knows the difference between sacrifice and self-erasure, between compassion and compliance, between connection and codependence. You feel it when you leave a conversation feeling smaller, when you walk away from an encounter and have to piece yourself back together, when your intuition tugs, but you dismiss it in favor of being agreeable. Over time, these moments compound into a quiet grief, the kind of grief that doesn't come from loss, but from ongoing disconnection from yourself. And then, one day, you just stop. You stop pretending you're okay when you're not. You stop explaining your worth. You stop dimming your truth to be palatable. And in that stop, there is power, a sacred reclaiming, not of status or identity, but of sovereignty. You might lose people. Let that be okay. You might disappoint expectations. Let that be okay. You might feel unsure of who you are without all the masks. Let that be more than okay. That uncertainty is not weakness. It is growth, the space where your true self begins to rise. Your soul is not interested in performance. It is interested in presence. It does not want applause. It wants alignment. And when you begin to align, something shifts. You no longer seek validation from sources that drained you. You no longer try to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer accept crumbs and call them connection. Instead, you begin to wait. Not from a place of lack, but from a place of knowing. You wait for resonance, for presence, for energy that feels clean. You wait not because you're passive, but because you're clear. Clear that your spirit is not available for anything that diminishes your light, even subtly. And this waiting is not empty. It is full of becoming, of remembering, of re-anchoring in your own worth. You begin to enjoy your own company again. You laugh differently, softer, truer. You rest more. You dream more. You start saying no and don't explain why. You choose what feels nourishing, not what looks impressive. You live slower, and in that slowness, you start to see again, not with your eyes, but with your soul. Ask yourself gently, where is my soul quietly saying no? Is it in the friendship that always drains, the job that never fits, the relationship that feels like negotiation, the daily rituals that no longer align? You don't need to burn it all down. You just need to stop participating in what no longer honors who you're becoming. This rebellion is sacred. It is not a tantrum. It is a turning, a returning, a remembering of your value, of your boundaries, of your voice. It doesn't ask you to be louder. It asks you to be truer. And in that truth, the right people begin to appear. The kind that don't need you to shrink, the kind that feel like exhale, the kind that mirror back your light, not because you've earned it, but because they can see it. But none of it arrives until you choose yourself, quietly, repeatedly, without apology. The world may not understand your rebellion. That's fine. It's not for the world. It's for you, for the little girl or boy inside who once had to settle, for the teenager who thought love meant disappearing, for the adult who forgot how to listen to their own breath. You are listening now. And every time you do, something returns your intuition, your clarity, your sacred defiance. So breathe with it, trust it, follow it. The quiet rebellion is the beginning of real freedom. There comes a point when the cost of approval outweighs its comfort, when you've bent for too long, smiled too wide, clapped for things that drained you, when being liked feels hollow. And you begin to wonder, what am I sacrificing just to keep the peace? The answer is sobering your wholeness. You've been taught to value harmony, to keep the waters calm, to soften your edges for the sake of togetherness. But in doing so, how many times have you diluted your truth? How many versions of yourself have you buried beneath what was acceptable, palatable, pleasing? Carl Jung said that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration, by bringing every part of you home, even the ones you were told to hide. especially those. Approval is addictive. It masquerades as love. It gives you a hit of belonging, but it fades quickly, leaving you anxious, dependent, unsure. Because approval doesn't see you, it sees what you perform, and if you ever stop performing, it disappears. So you stay agreeable, you nod when you want to challenge, you give when you want to rest, you stay when you want to leave. And all the while, your soul is shrinking, whispering, "This isn't who we are." Wholeness feels different. It doesn't always win you applause, but it never asks you to abandon yourself. It doesn't seek to impress, it seeks to express. It isn't loud or needy. It is grounded, calm, quietly radiant, and from that space, you no longer beg for connection. You become the kind of person connection is drawn to authentically, effortlessly. It begins with a choice to stop asking, "Will they like me?" and start asking, "Do I like how I feel around them?" Approval will teach you to measure your value through their eyes. Wholeness asks you to feel it in your body. Imagine this, you're in a conversation and someone disagrees with you. Your instinct is to smooth it over, to retreat, to agree. But this time, you don't. You stay rooted. You let your truth stand not as an attack, but as an offering. You don't demand agreement. You simply exist. And in that moment, you feel it a strange, radiant peace. You didn't lose yourself. You didn't disappear. That's what choosing wholeness feels like. And once you taste it, you don't go back. Still, the pull of approval is strong, especially if your early life taught you that love had to be earned, that being yourself was risky. That disagreement meant rejection. These old stories run deep, but you are not that child anymore. You are not powerless. You are not here to beg for a seat at a table that doesn't feed your soul. Ask yourself, where do I still seek permission to be myself? Maybe it's in how you dress, in how you speak, in how you post online, in how you show up in love. Maybe you're still editing your joy so it's not too much, or hiding your sadness so it's not too heavy. Maybe you're still trying to be the version of yourself that people expect, instead of the one you actually are. And the truth is, your real people can only find you when you stop hiding. When you drop the act, when you let the silence linger, when you stop needing to be liked, and start needing to feel whole. It might be lonely at first. Choosing wholeness often means losing the circles you once fit into. But the spaces that no longer match your frequency are not rejections, they are redirections. Every no that comes from your truth is a yes to something deeper. You'll start to notice it in your body, the way your breath deepens around people who hold space, the way your posture softens when you don't feel judged, the way your laughter feels more honest, the way your intuition rises instead of retreats. This is the inner shift from performing to being, from surviving to belonging, from approval to peace. And from this place, you begin to make decisions that align with your actual values, not the ones you inherited, not the ones others demand, but your own. You no longer say yes out of guilt. You no longer chase people who drain you. You no longer try to prove your worth in spaces that can't hold it. You begin to say, "This is who I am," with softness and certainty. You begin to say, "No, thank you," without guilt. You begin to choose relationships where you are loved, not tolerated. And the more you choose wholeness, the less approval matters. Because wholeness is not loud, it is still. It is the quiet sense that you belong to yourself first. And from there, all things flow: honest love, true friendship, deep joy. So breathe now. Ask yourself, what part of me have I been trading for approval? Call that part home. Hold it, honor it, let it know that from now on, it doesn't have to perform. It only has to be. There's a kind of magic that starts to unfold when you stop chasing love and begin embodying it. When you no longer twist yourself into shapes to be chosen. When you no longer run toward every flicker of attention. You begin to notice something curious. What once felt scarce begins to appear effortlessly. Not because the world has changed, but because your energy has. This is synchronicity, the outer world reflecting the shifts in your inner world. Carl Jung called it the meaningful coincidence, the alignment of inner knowing with outer unfolding. It's not luck, it's resonance, and it doesn't begin when you find the right person. It begins when you return to your right self. As long as you chase love from a place of emptiness, you attract mirrors of that emptiness. Relationships that echo your longing but cannot fill it. People who match your hunger but not your wholeness. And so you settle not for what you truly need, but for what temporarily soothes. But when you become the presence you've been seeking, everything changes. You stop grasping. You stop waiting for the text, the compliment, the invitation. You stop reading silence as rejection and begin to read it as space. A pause, a sacred breath where something new can arrive, not from force, but from frequency. It's subtle. You wake up one day and realize that you no longer feel desperate to be seen. You feel content to see yourself. You speak without rehearsing. You say no without defending. You walk away without needing to be chased. You let people misunderstand you because you no longer need to explain. And then it happens. A stranger says something that echoes a thought you had that morning. An old friend reaches out just when you were thinking of them. An opportunity lands in your lap without effort. A person enters your life who sees the real you and doesn't flinch. This is not magic. This is you, unblocked. Because when you remove the distortions, the fear, the pretending, the self-abandonment, you begin to vibrate in clarity. And clarity calls in clarity. Wholeness calls in wholeness. Truth calls in truth. But this requires stillness, and stillness can be uncomfortable. Because in the quiet, you meet the parts of you that once clung so tightly, the version of you that felt unlovable unless constantly reassured, the part that panicked in the face of silence, the one that confused chemistry with chaos. In the stillness, they rise, and you do not reject them. You hold them. You say, I see you, but I no longer need to live from you. That's how you break the cycle, not by force, by integration. By being with yourself long enough that you no longer fear your own company. By learning that your worth is not measured by how often your phone lights up, or how intensely someone else desires you, or how many friends you have around you. You begin to feel your worth like a hum beneath your skin, quiet, steady, undeniable. And then, synchronicity. You walk into rooms where you no longer scan for approval. You meet people who feel like exhale. You speak and feel your words land, not because they're perfect, but because they're true. And when something doesn't resonate, you no longer force it. You bless it and release it, because you trust now, not just in the process, but in yourself. Ask yourself now, where have I been trying to force what was never mine? Maybe it's the love you keep chasing, hoping they'll finally see you. The career path that impresses others but leaves you dry. The friendships where you do all the reaching. The spaces where you never feel fully welcome. Let them go. Not from bitterness, from clarity. Because when you stop grasping, your hands are free to receive. And when you trust your energy, your truth, your resonance, your soul's quiet alignment, you become magnetic. Not to everyone, but to those meant for you. Those who recognize you by frequency, not facade. Who don't need your mask to feel at ease. Who bring peace, not performance. And those connections, they don't need to be chased. They arrive. That is synchronicity. That is the power of no longer settling. It begins the moment you stop looking outward for what can only be claimed within. The moment you realize that the love you seek, the connection you crave, the belonging you long for, it already lives in you. And from that knowing, life arranges itself around your truth. So breathe with that. Feel your own energy settle. Feel your own spirit soften. Feel your own self come home. Synchronicity begins when you do. It's tempting to believe that if you just found the right person, everything would change. That if someone finally loved you in all the ways you long for, the ache would dissolve, the anxiety would quiet, the emptiness would be filled. It's the oldest fantasy in the human heart that love will save us from ourselves. But it won't, not in the way you think. Because even the most soulful love cannot do the work your own soul is here to do. No one can breathe life into your inner world except you. No one can make you feel worthy if you haven't met your own worth with reverence. No one can hold your truth if you are still hiding it from yourself. And so the real work, deep, sometimes uncomfortable, often invisible, is inner. Carl Jung understood this. He knew that every relationship, every trigger, every longing is a mirror, not to shame you, not to torment you, but to show you where you have yet to come home. When you feel unlovable in someone's absence, it's a sign that you've abandoned your own heart. When you panic in silence, it means you haven't learned to feel safe in your own presence. This isn't about blame, it's about power. You're not powerless to your pain. You're not cursed to repeat old patterns forever. You're not broken beyond healing, but you do have to stop outsourcing your wholeness. You have to stop searching for someone else to complete the story you haven't written for yourself. This is the sacred responsibility of healing. It begins with noticing when you feel jealous, instead of spiraling. You ask, what does this show me about what I've been denying myself? When you feel ignored, instead of chasing, you ask, where have I ignored my own needs? When someone pulls away and it shatters you, you ask, why is my sense of self so tied to their attention? These are not easy questions, but they are holy. Because every time you answer them with honesty, you peel back a layer, you stop being a passenger in your life and become the author, you reclaim agency. And in that reclamation, the quality of your relationship shifts, not because you found someone new, but because you become someone new. You show up differently. You speak more clearly. You expect less performance. You notice red flags faster. You don't confuse chaos with passion. You hold your own hand through hard moments. And others begin to meet you at that level, or they fall away, not out of cruelty, but because their role in your story is complete. You no longer need them to show you where your wounds are. You've taken that task into your own hands. This is not the glamorous work. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't look impressive on social media, but it's the most important work you'll ever do, because it's the foundation for everything else. Want deeper connection. Heal your fear of being seen. Want real intimacy. Unlearn the belief that your needs are a burden. Want lasting love. Learn to sit in your own discomfort without demanding someone else fix it. Ask yourself gently, now, where am I still expecting someone else to do what only I can do for myself? It might be in the way you seek constant reassurance, the way you panic when someone doesn't reply fast enough, the way you fear being alone, the way you overgive just to feel valuable. These are not flaws. They are signals, invitations, places where your own presence is needed. So, show up, again and again, in the quiet moments, in the messy ones, in the heartbreak, in the joy. Speak to yourself like someone worth staying for. Hold space for your inner child. Ask your shadow what it's trying to protect you from. Forgive the version of you who didn't know better. Thank them. They got you here. And now, you are ready. Not for someone to save you, but to meet someone from wholeness, not hunger. From truth, not trauma. From fullness, not fear. The real work is quiet, gentle, often slow, but it lasts. And it frees you. It frees you from needing love to prove your worth. It frees you from chasing connection out of scarcity. It frees you from the exhausting dance of shape-shifting just to be accepted. And from that freedom, real love can finally land, not because it's saving you, but because it's resonating with you. So, breathe here. Let go of the idea that someone else is the missing piece. You are the whole puzzle. Let your presence be the gift you once begged others to give you. The real work is inner, and you are already doing it. There is a kind of quiet magnetism that begins to bloom when you respect yourself. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout in crowded rooms. It simply is, unshakable, steady, rooted, and from it flows a new kind of connection, one that doesn't require sacrifice, performance, or pain. You've likely spent a lifetime being taught that love is something you earn, that being chosen means being good, agreeable, accommodating, that boundaries are walls, that self-respect is arrogance. And so you learn to soften your no, to laugh when something didn't feel right, to stay longer than your soul could bear. But now, you are beginning to remember something truer, that real love does not require you to abandon yourself, that your truth is not an obstacle to connection, it is the gateway. That your boundaries are not rejection, they are invitation. Invitation to meet you where you actually live, not where you pretend to be. Carl Jung knew the power of inner alignment, that when your outer life reflects your inner clarity, you become whole. And from that wholeness, you no longer attract chaos. You no longer tolerate almost. You no longer chase love that costs you your peace. This is the turning point. Self-respect is not about drawing lines in the sand and daring others to cross them. It's about knowing, deeply, that you are already whole and that anything entering your life must honor that wholeness. You don't need to convince. You don't need to plead. You simply choose. Choose what nourishes. Choose what expands. Choose what honors your breath. It begins subtly. You no longer answer messages that drain you. You no longer explain decisions that come from your intuition. You walk away from attention that feels empty. You say no with softness, but certainty. You say yes only when your entire body aligns. And as you do, something changes. People feel it. They may not know what it is, but they feel it. Your energy becomes clearer, your presence more grounded, your eyes steadier. Not because you are performing confidence, but because you are resting in your own truth. And that rest, that inner calm, is magnetic. The kind of love you once chased now begins to notice you. The kind of connection that once felt out of reach begins to approach. You are no longer trying to be chosen. You are choosing, not from fear, from clarity, not from emptiness, from self-respect. Ask yourself now, what would it look like to hold my standards without apology? Maybe it means walking away from the almost relationship you've been clinging to. Maybe it means finally telling the truth you've been sitting on for months. Maybe it means making peace with solitude instead of filling the void with noise. Maybe it simply means pausing long enough to hear yourself before listening to anyone else. This is not pride, it is reverence. Reverence for your own becoming. Reverence for the woman or man you are growing into. Reverence for the journey you've taken to arrive here after years of softening your truth just to be loved. No more. You are done proving. You are done performing. You are done asking others to see your light when you have finally remembered how to see it yourself. From this place, you attract not saviors, but equals, not admirers, but mirrors. People who do not need you to shrink. People who meet you in the quiet. People who love not just your best, but your whole. People who bring peace, not adrenaline. Safety, not unpredictability. Truth, not games. And if they don't come, that's okay too. Because the deeper truth is you are not waiting. You are living. Fully, authentically, softly, boldly, without apology. You are no longer settling because you finally settled into yourself. And that is where love finds you. Not the kind of love that demands, but the kind that listens. Not the kind that tests you, but the kind that holds you. Not the kind that flickers, but the kind that stays. Because when you hold your own soul with devotion, you teach the world how to treat you. So pause now, breathe into your own being. Feel your self-respect settle into your bones. Feel your dignity rise with your inhale. Feel your light expand, not for show, but for truth. You are no longer trying to be worthy. You are walking as if you already are, because you are. Now, let it all settle. Let the words blur, soften, fade like fog lifting slowly from a quiet lake. You don't need to hold them tightly. They were never instructions, only mirrors, reflections of what you already know. Deep down, beneath the noise, beneath the ache, beneath the old habit of looking outward. What you've been searching for was never outside of you. Not in their eyes, not in their arms, not in the space you tried to fill with noise and approval and almost love. It's here, in your breath, in the stillness, in the place that finally stopped begging and started listening. You don't need to settle, because nothing is missing. You don't need to chase, because what's meant for you won't ask you to abandon yourself. You don't need to explain, because your worth is not up for debate. Let this truth wrap around you now like a blanket when you choose yourself. The world learns to love the real you. Not the version you polished to be palatable, but the you that breathes slow, the you that feels deeply, the you that says no with grace, the you that dares to wait, to soften, to stand. This is not an end, it's a return. A quiet, sacred turning inward to the self that never left, the self that has always known. You are not too much. You are not too late. You are not too alone. The love you seek is already within you. And now you are finally ready to receive it.